Hi, I'm Lindsay Assis. I am an intern with AI for Good, and I am here to produce an interview with Vipin Kumar. And welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Great. So just to get us started, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be involved with AI for Good?
I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Minnesota, and my research area is high performance computing, big data, machine learning, and I've been working in this area for about 35 years. But I got involved in the general area of AI for good starting about 20 years ago when I came across some researchers from NASA who were very excited about being able to use high performance computing and machine learning, big data techniques in the context of monitoring the Earth and its environment. So I got started on it about 2000, and it has been a sort of a long journey since then on making some of these technologies useful for the environment.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today. So would you mind telling us how you apply your work as an AI researcher to sustainable development initiatives?
So broadly speaking, the a computer scientist sort of becomes relevant to the environmental goals with the way of using computers to help solve the problems. And one of the ways computers have always provided help for the environmental problems is by providing large amount of computing power. You know, if you're trying to model the climate system, you need faster computers. And so that has been sort of one mode of interaction between computer scientists and the environmental scientists. But more recently, with the availability of very large amount of data sets, many of them coming from the satellites, many of them coming from the sensors on the ground, and from other sources like models itself, there's an opportunity to analyze those very, very large data sets to answer some of the environmental questions that are difficult to answer using the traditional paradigms. So that's sort of how I started on this path in collaboration. And my first collaboration with Chris Potter at NASA back in 2003, which was sort of a long time ago, was able to produce the first global history of major disasters that happened using satellite data. So it was analysis done on a very crude scale. It was sort of done for any major disaster that impacted vegetation on the global scale in a period of 1982 to 1998, about 18-year period. And during that time, any major disaster that happened that impacted the vegetation was captured by this analysis. And there was the first history of its first analysis of this kind on a global scale, enabled by the big data that NASA was collecting and the power of machine learning and high performance computing that we had in our lab. So that's sort of how we started working on this path.
Wow, that's very impressive. Thank you so much for explaining that for us. Can you describe how you contribute to Fragile Earth and how you use AI towards preserving the environment?
So one of the biggest contribution that we are trying to make here is improve the capability to monitor the environment, different aspects of the environment. For example, the vegetation, the forests, or the urbanization growth, or the growth of the areas where the people are farming certain types of product. So being able to monitor the state of the environment from different perspectives is being made possible because of these advances in technology that have happened over the last 20 years, which involve faster computers, better machine learning techniques, and combination of those is really, really powerful. And as a result, we have produced global products in our lab that sort of lead to the way the tropical forests are being converted into plantations. Global product are sort of telling us what's happening to the water bodies on a global scale, and the deforestation dynamics. So these are the kind of things we are sort of working to provide the right information.
Great, thank you so much. And just to clarify, how long have you been working on Fragile Earth?
On environmental aspects related to Fragile Earth, it's I would say this is going back to about 20 years. When we started in
Wow.
in 2000. Yes.
Mhm. Thank you so much. So how do you think machine learning can be utilized to meet the Sustainable Development Goal from the UN of no hunger?
Okay, so actually a very important goal. We are at about 7.5 billion people on the earth. We'll be growing to about 10 billion in another few decades, adding about at least 2 to 2.5 billion people. And most of these people, majority of these people would be added in Africa. And Africa is a land where there are still a lot of forests intact, a lot of, but if to feed those people, if we followed the process that we have followed in the rest of the world, which is to cut more trees and then increase more areas for agriculture, we will be actually doing a big damage to the global environment. So the key question one becomes is, how do you feed the increasing population and without deforesting any more land? Actually, we have to convert much of that land back, much of the deforested land back to the reforestation, to the forested areas to address the climate change needs. And that means we have to improve productivity. And one of the ways we have improved productivity in the past is by using more fertilizers. But we know that by using more fertilizers, we actually do more damage to the environment. We
Right.
contaminate the water supplies and eventually contaminate the oceans. So there are a lot of factors that are coming in. We have to develop crops that are more resilient to droughts, more resilient to infestations, can work with less fertilizers, and feed more people, which means they can be more productive and more nutrition rich. And all of these requires application of machine learning technologies to be able to at many different levels. And one of them is being able to produce seeds that are highly productive, being able to come up with management practices that lead to higher yields, coming up with technologies that allow more of the nutrients to be absorbed, more of the fertilizer to be absorbed in the soil as opposed to run off into the air by technologies such as planting of cover crops. So there are many different ways machine learning can help in this area to improve the productivity, reduce a smaller amount of land, smaller amount of fertilizers, and have less impact on the environment.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really interesting how machine learning can be used for such a noble cause that's going to be so important in the coming decades. And continuing with that idea, do you think it is possible and are you hopeful that we will be able to achieve no hunger by 2030, especially in Africa?
It's possible, but the community has to work together in the sense that I, I would say the technology path is there to get us to reach that point. But
Mhm.
to reach that point, we involve cooperation, not just from the people who are in the technical areas, but people who are on the ground, and people, including governments, including non-governmental organizations like the AI for Good Foundation, for example. So we need cooperation between many sectors of the society to come together to make that happen. It's definitely possible, and the cost of not doing it is very high. In the sense there'll be a lot of people hungry, and then we could be moving towards a path which is not sustainable. And because the ending the food the global hunger while not destroying the climate and the planet is very important together. So it requires cooperation between many different entities.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I would agree with you. I do think it's very possible, although we do definitely have a long way to go. So, in terms of things that are happening right now, I know we think a lot about the future, but can you think of any current examples in which a country or region is effectively addressing the UN goal of no hunger using artificial intelligence?
Well, I would give you one example. I wouldn't say that they're being effectively addressed, but at least there is an attempt to address them. So there is we are working collaboratively on a very large project funded by the Department of Defense, DARPA, and Bill Gates Foundation. Again, the two entities never came together except for this entity to work in Ethiopia. So this project funded by DARPA is on building models, modeling the interconnected component of the environment in the context of food security. And Bill Gates Foundation is very heavily involved in many countries in Africa. Uh, and one of them, they have created a focus is in Ethiopia. And then basically, we are working together with the scientists in Ethiopia and the foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and under the auspices of DARPA funding, to figure out how do we model the hydrological cycles, how do we figure out the right places to plant, how do we figure out the impact of different resources on the food productivity, how do we figure out the impact of scarcity of water or floods on the ability of farmers to produce food. And that gives me hope that if a model like this can be made to succeed for one country in Africa, it perhaps could be scaled up to many, many other countries in the region.
Wow, yes, that is definitely amazing. It's good to hear of examples of how AI is being used right now. I think a lot of people think it's something abstract and something that we can't use in our like current situation, but to hear that there are solutions being made right now is very helpful. So thank you for sharing. Do you think the future of achieving the SDGs involves AI and machine learning from here on? Do you think it will be always a part of our process?
I think so. I think so, and I think it's the AI machine learning and what has really happened is the confluence of three technologies: the big data that's becoming available, high performance computing, and the AI/machine learning, and they're interconnected in the sense that each one of them is aiding the other. So basically, confluence of these things is changing every single discipline, every single scientific discipline is able to see the value in making use of it. So absolutely any major initiative in the world, including any environmental initiative, including any of the sustainable development goals that United Nations has, have to involve AI and machine learning because they are such powerful tools. They can provide actionable information, they can provide better guidance, they can provide better hypotheses, better way to reach people. So they can improve productivity in so many different ways. They can improve efficiency in the whole process in so many different ways. I see absolutely critical role for AI in all of these goals.
Great. Thank you so much. That's such a great answer. And obviously, AI is constantly changing and improving. So, in your ideal or in your head, what do you think AI will look like in 10 years for sustainable development? Do you think it will change?
I think what would change is the focus, because if you look at bulk of the work done in the AI community, it's driven by consumers. It's driven by how we buy things, how we entertain ourselves, how we consume news, how do we interconnect with other people. So very vast majority of the AI enterprise is focused on the commercial sector, and what slowly what I'm seeing here in the last few years is communities, sub-communities like AI for Good foundations. There are and many other subgroups like that, and then the researchers who are trying to make a way for these technologies to be used for public good. And I suspect that as we go forward, I suspect that there'll be many more of people like us than the ones who are focusing entirely on making sure that the people click on the right ad or buy the right product, or sort of, in other ways contribute to commercial success of company, which are of course extremely important. But these things are the same tools and technologies can be very valuable for public good as well.
I think that would inspire a lot of hope for a lot of people if it does continue in that trend. And we're so glad to be having you working on this, not from the consumer front, but for the good of humanity. I think it's an amazing thing. So, all these great things about AI, obviously, to look forward to. Aside from that, do you think there are any limitations of using AI to pursue sustainability goals, or are there any?
Well, the primary limitation that we all have to be aware of, any one of us who is developing technology, is that the solutions involve people, okay? And the scientists have to make sure that they keep in mind the needs of the people. So it's not enough for us to develop fancy tools, solutions that they seem to work very well in the labs, but we have to make sure they make it into practice. And that involves connecting with people who are involved in the part of the solution. And we're learning a lot of that in the context of Ethiopia, because we may think of certain tools that are going to be very effective, but we have to figure out exactly what is it that works for the small farmers on the ground, what works under the conditions that are available in the different countries, which are, people have very limited resources and information. And how do you adapt the technologies to work in those contexts is just as important, actually, I would say far more important than even developing fancier technologies.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I hope that as AI becomes more accessible throughout the world, that we can all work to make it part of our current reality. So thank you so much for outlining that for us. And out of curiosity, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the AI for Good Foundation community and supporters?
I think I would just say that AI is a very powerful tool, and it has completely transformed the way we live, in our lives. Even during the pandemic, we're able to do certain things that would not be possible without the technologies that have been developed very recently. And many people are scared that this technology might be used for bad things, and it might sort of, it may sort of, it may sort of become a powerful tool in the hand of bad people. But I think if the technology is developed properly, it could really be a force for good in the society. And our hope is that by way of some of the environmental, using AI for the environmental problem, we can sort of show that yes, this technology can help us live more efficiently, more sustainably, and lead to a better society, which can deal with challenges such as climate change, food security, health security.
Perfect. Thank you so much. This was really enlightening and has definitely inspired hope for my day and for my future days to come. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you. Bye-bye.